Welcome, everyone, to today's exclusive Fireside Chat webinar being hosted by the Institute of Sustainability Studies in collaboration with UrbanVolt, the leading global provider of affordable clean energy. I'm thrilled to have all of you here join us on LinkedIn for this very engaging and insightful discussion on Beyond Carbon, building resilient, sustainable businesses. Before we dive in, I would like to introduce you to our esteemed speakers for the day. I'm joined by Justin Jacober, CEO of UrbanVolt. Justin brings over 20 years of experience in the energy sector across Europe, North and South America, with a focus on both regulated and deregulated markets. His background includes scaling clean energy solutions and leading innovative energy initiatives. And at UrbanVolt, Justin is driving the company's mission of making clean energy accessible through innovation and solutions like solar as a service, which eliminates upfront investment for businesses, helping them transition seamlessly to renewable energy. And you'll hear Justin in conversation with Niall Collins, the CEO of the Institute of Sustainability Studies. Niall comes with a wealth of experience where his career has spanned years of impactful sustainability consulting, having advised organizations across various sectors. He is instrumental in driving the Institute's vision to empower businesses with comprehensive sustainability education. And today he'll be sharing his insights on the critical role of education and training in supporting decarbonization efforts. We hope the session will inspire you and that it will offer you clarity on actionable solutions and give you the tools really needed to begin or enhance your decarbonization efforts. Please feel free to drop any questions for the experts in the comment section on LinkedIn, and I'll get the experts around to answering them towards the end. Thank you once again for joining us. And with that, we'll get started. Niall, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Nazi. I appreciate it. And first of all, welcome everyone. Great to have you live here this afternoon. And also, Justin, thank you very much for your time. It's brilliant to have you with us as well. For those of you who don't know, of Institute of Sustainability Studies, we're an education company. We're focused on providing business professionals with practical sustainability education. And we offer this at an individual level, team level. And we recognize the need really to empower professionals within businesses to bring about change, to have the knowledge and practical steps and forward-looking view to as I said, create that system transformation that's required within every business. And I am very welcome to have Justin. The Institute of Sustainability Studies and UrbanVolt are kind of working closely together, particularly moving into 2025. A key focus for us at ISS is to showcase to you guys practical solutions that can be taken for businesses. You know, it's a very daunting space, sustainability. It's changing quite quickly. So therefore, we want to show you and showcase examples and organizations that are working with businesses and businesses that are taking action. And one way is obviously true what UrbanVolt is doing. So Nazia mentioned a small bit there, Justin, around your background, but I think it would be great before we kind of dive into the list of questions we have is really to share a bit about yourself, your journey, but also a bit about UrbanVolt's mission. I think what's really interesting here is it's a new business model approaching kind of that energy space, that decarbonisation journey, and it's a really interesting way of how you guys work with businesses and also the major benefits you are seeing with the approach you're taking working with businesses. So it'd be really interesting for you to kind of elaborate a bit more about UrbanVolt, what you guys do, and also how that model works and the impact that you're kind of seeing as well in terms of how this model is working with your clients.
Sure, happily. I think firstly, thank you for the invite. I think the work that ISS is doing is absolutely fundamental to make sure that we educate the market and accelerate our movement to a clean energy network. So very quickly, so I spent 10 years in R&D and manufacturing, which sort of instilled a entrepreneurial belief, and then 20 years in sort of all forms of power gen, but came to the UK 4 years ago from Canada because really the focus in the country, and I would say across Europe, is it's desperately needed to start to look at our power systems differently, right? We really have to do this and shape the way that both we're going to use power and future generations, right, will be using power. So you know, my view is decarbonization is definitely not a fad. It's a genuine need, and it's almost the, you know, we have to do this now because there's parts of the world that are literally on fire, right? So it's an obligation for us. I think the other piece is, why do we do this? Because we want to leave a legacy, right? And I think when I got to know UrbanVolt, I mean, when they asked me to join the team, kind of jumped at the chance, right? So they are doing something that is very, very unique in the market. They're making it really easy for customers, right, to be able to decarbonize their network. And one of the pieces, it was somewhat open, but you know, our vision, what we really want to make sure is that we believe in a future, right, where every business has access to affordable, clean energy. It's that fundamental driver as to how we make sure that people have access, right? You can reduce your energy consumption, you can increase profitability, so they're not at odds, right? They're actually complementary with one another, and you can become more sustainable. So, you know, UrbanVolt, I mean, really, it's a nimble group, right? They're entrepreneurial. They have 400 customers in Ireland, UK, the US, and 8 European countries. One piece that was really, really interesting, and for those on the call that are thinking about it, but B Corp is a really, really important consideration, and it really enshrines at a corporate level the requirements as to how you work, right? And sustainability is at the heart of the decisions that you make, and you're obligated to do so. The other piece in this, we partnered with Verdane, or Verdane acquired UrbanVolt 18 months ago. And it's just another credit to where the market's going. So just for some of those that don't know, they're leading PE, you know, multi-billion pound investment across 200 portfolio companies, really looking at digitization and decarb as a portfolio. So you know, you're seeing more of this, right, where there's competition that's coming in the market, and that's a good thing. So you know, I see, you know, when people are starting to sort of flood, you know, hundreds of millions and billions of pounds, euros into a certain segment, you know that there's something there. And what we have is very, very unique. So I'll talk a little bit more to your question on sort of how does it work? So what I love about our solution, and I've worked in, you know, a number of different companies where I thought I was able to make it simple, but you know, after coming to work with the UrbanVolt team, I realized how little I did. Still proud, right, of the work that I've done, but what UrbanVolt does is we just make it super simple, right? So if you think of it, we finance, build, own, operate a system where our customers don't have to pay anything for it. So the question is, it sounds too good to be true. Well, at the end of it, what we do is we're really good at power, right? We're really good at what we do. And what we believe is we want to partner with companies that are really good with what they do, right? So we're kind of a small to mid-sized company. There's no one really doing this in the space, right? Once you're into sort of large utility size scale, I mean, there's utilities that are doing that. But below that, if you're a manufacturer that has, you know, 20, 30 million in capital requirements to replace your equipment every year, you probably don't want to be dropping in, you know, a couple million into a solar system that you don't know how to operate. So what we do is we do that, right? So we come in, we assess our customers' needs. We'll do a deal that's either 10, 20, 30 years, whatever makes sense. Very, very flexible in what we do and how we approach it. It's a very simple process. So how long does it take? I mean, it can be anywhere from, you know, first conversation to a system that's operating kind of 6 months, which is somewhat unheard of. Like, people are surprised when we do that. But again, our contracts are pretty simple and our motivations are aligned. And I think there's something in this where, you know, again, people say, well, it doesn't make sense. Well, what makes sense about the model is we only make money when our customers are saving money. So from a plant perspective, if the unit isn't operating, we're highly motivated to get out there to make sure it's operating, because our capital is also tied, right, to the unit operating. But what it does is that, you know, we see customers save, you know, from grid costs, kind of 30 to 50% day one. So that's a pretty significant just drop in your operating cost. You have carbon savings in tons, and literally tons, right, that you can report on. What that does, and I'm a firm believer in this, is, you know, so many more companies are looking at, and we'll talk maybe a little bit more about sort of scope 1, 2, 3. But as you talk about your scope reporting requirements on the RFP basis when you're competing, it gives you a competitive opportunity to, one, market, but two, you know, fulfill the obligations that are coming out in the market. So, you know, I'm surprised that there isn't more of a pull from this, but I think there's an education in the market that we need to do more of, where you're going to save a bunch of money. You're going to reduce your carbon footprint. You're going to reduce your reliance on the grid, and you're going to be more competitive.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll stop there, but is there anything
Yeah.
that didn't
No,
make sense in that?
no, absolutely. And I think that's the thing. And I think you made a point there particularly, which is interesting as well, because you mentioned, you have the big players, the larger corporations who have endless resources,
Yeah.
can afford the investment in these large renewables. But really it's that next level down. And similar for ourselves here, you're trying to provide an ease of solution that people can uptake this seamlessly without effort, or not without effort, but
Right.
without complexity. And also that's the challenge a lot for those kind of SMEs, SMBs, organizations where the lack of resources, maybe lack of skill set, and it's also where we see the challenge. People need that education within that level. They need the practical knowledge to demystify the space and just cut through the noise and let them know what they need and how they're going to be successful.
Mhm.
And I suppose one thing to dive in, because you did also mention as well around that piece of, decoupling, um, really action on sustainability and the cost associated with it. And I think we are kind of witnessing a pivotal moment really now within kind of decarbonisation journeys for businesses as well as around sustainability, that for the last number of years it's been seen as, a voluntary action, a voluntary initiative, but more as a cost. And also now that this kind of shift around kind of from a strategic perspective, but especially driven by regulation, particularly within the EU space, with the onset of corporate sustainability reporting directive, that now it's a compliance, it's a mandatory issue, and it's a really another kind of headache. But I think to kind of dive a bit more in, which would be really interesting, is beyond that compliance. How can really businesses look at this area, this solution, these actions they need to take more so from a genuine opportunity, from an innovative, from a competitive advantage, from value creation, rather than so from a regulatory requirement. So it'd be good to kind of hear a bit more about that and your perspective on that as well, and really kind of using these demands and growing demands as a catalyst for kind of meaningful change and meaningful action as well.
Yeah, so there was one point that you said I just want to pick up on, where I'll get the numbers generally right, but I'll go on the low side. Kind of 70% of companies today don't, one, have a sustainability program in place, but two, also, and I think equally as important, don't have a budget set aside.
Yeah.
So, how do you go about doing that? I mean, I think there's a couple of components that we need to think about to maybe build on your question now. I mean, there are frameworks, right, that we all are all working within, and it'll become critical, right, that we comply. But it should be fairly straightforward, but you need people to help you with that. So if we think about this, I mean, there'll be three probably components that likely make sense to talk around: probably energy efficiency, renewable energy adoption, and then carbon reporting frameworks, right? So if we delve a little bit further into those, on how do we get energy efficiency, I mean, really what we've seen is, from a technology piece, costs are driving down, right? So no longer do you see solar, battery, wind at a higher price than what you would from a gas plant or a coal plant, right? To use an older example. But that inflection where, the technology is now available, right? So that, you can do this at the price equal or better than at the market. The other piece is, once you take grid costs out of the equation, you're at a significant benefit, right? So not only is the tech cheaper, but after you reduce the grid costs, you're so much you're saving so much more money. One piece within that, though, I would say, is customer understanding and that pull for solutions, right? So it's kind of like you have to force. It's like if you want change, you have to be some of that force, right, to make that change happen. But how we push for accessibility, so it's across all entities, all companies, right, is a really, really important consideration for all energy providers as we go forward. So I think, as we look at that, that's key. Energy adoption, if we go back to that, I mean, I talked a little bit about how scale and cost is really dropping, but how you create, and maybe it's a little too techie, but kind of a microgrid and more localized distribution, and getting sort of segments of the market off of the grid, right? So as we get EV charge or EV technologies and EV cars on the road, you'll see these little microgrids where you can charge and discharge, right, to reduce the demand on the grid as we go forward. But when you look at how do we really implement carbon reporting frameworks, I mean, I think the product that we have, where it's basically a zero cost solution for customers to come in and secure zero cost power, right? Where you're saving
Yeah.
from day one, is a super, super interesting opportunity. And again, there's more people coming in the market to do this. And that's a really, really good thing, because it needs to drive competition, which again will drive more efficiency and continue to drive prices down. I think lastly is really just around transparent reporting. We need to get a framework, and how the CSRD is put together needs to really enforce how do we measure scope reporting, how do we ensure that there's a commonality across what does it mean, and greenwashing, right, if you will, starts to become days of the past versus where we are today.
Yeah, and I think like that's an important kind of point here as well, is for organizations not to see these regulations as a barrier, but more as an opportunity, right?
Correct.
You're providing that standard to provide that transparency. You're providing that understanding to gain yourself an understanding of your baseline and begin to take action. But also, as you mentioned there, in doing so, there is opportunity and there is advantages, and it's not just the cost. Well, in a sense, for lack of a better term, you're going to get the payback from it. And ultimately the importance of just getting on the road and getting to the journey. And again, that's it. It's not
Yeah.
I suppose a carrot or a stick situation. It really is just get going. The green economy is coming. It's the only way forward. Like you mentioned there as well, because I suppose what's interesting is obviously the lowering of that kind of green energy and the availability of that now kind of becoming more and more transparent and more and more available. But within the Irish and the UK market, particularly, there is still kind of other challenges in terms of those decarbonisation pieces. You're looking potentially at outdated infrastructure, slow policy rollouts has always been an issue. And I know before we went live, we did kind of briefly discuss that trinity of needs around that decarbonisation success. So it'd be great to kind of maybe for you to give us, I suppose, discuss some of those challenges and also kind of maybe give us a bit more detail around that trinity of needs. I know you might have mentioned some previously, but just to kind of walk us through that would be brilliant.
Yeah, and hopefully, I mean, there should be, to your Trinity component, if we think about the legs of the stool, some will be more difficult than others, but all of them together, right? If you do 30, 30, 30, 30, if you're lower on one but higher on the other, then it creates a positive sort of flywheel effect. So I'll talk a little bit about that. But piece one, and there's a lot in the media about this, and it really requires government support, but grid connections, right? How do we make sure that we tie the balance of the power that we're putting on the network to grid connections? They're absolutely key. So creating a favorable environment, right, where that's known and understood both from a cost and connection perspective is really, really key, right? And I think this is a struggle across a number of different markets at this point in time. But that's kind of piece one. Piece two, and I talked a little bit about it a minute ago, but us, so customers, right? So what we need to make sure that we're doing is really assessing and challenging kind of the status quo of what is the price? Is there a different way of getting it? There's a ton of alternative offers, right? So here for solar, you can build it yourself and manage it. It's a capital type deal, or you can do something like us, which is a PPA or finance deal. If you have lots of money and it's something that you want to move into, go for it. I mean, it makes sense to do that. I go back to the other point though on, what are you really good at? And is it energy? Because typically, there's a lot that goes along with that might not necessarily be in your core strengths. So if it's not, then, there's providers that provide services like us where you don't need to worry about it. So obviously, I'm biased into the product that I provide, but anything, to your point, to build on that, it just takes action. It takes all of it, and we won't get it 100% right. But even if we're 80% correct as we go forward, we're 80% closer, which is a huge stride rather than doing nothing. So customers, right, are absolutely key in driving this. And just reinforce part of the opening statement. Most of the tech is at least at parity, but certainly is kind of 50% lower than the prices of what you pay today, right? So I think that's the other piece. And then the other is know what's available. So kind of policy and funding and grants and incentives. Like governments are absolutely essential, and there's a lot of money floating out there that you can get. And in Ireland, there's a really, really critical grant that allows solar, right, investments to occur, and that's what government incentives are meant to do, right? So the way I think of it is, it's kind of it's grid. Where it used to be technology, that's been replaced with really grid connections. Two is customer demand, and then three is policy and funding to help support.
Yeah, and I think as well, as you mentioned there, like that customer piece and really challenging the status quo, which is again why I love what you guys are doing at UrbanVolt in relation to that, because it is a new way of thinking about how the energy system can be addressed and how businesses can work with an energy provider, and again managing that cost situation. And I think, as you mentioned there, which is another important point, was really it is just about taking that first step and taking action. Nothing is going to be perfect, and don't let perfection get in the way of good either. It's just a matter about starting and beginning that journey. And really, like you said, partnering with experts like yourself or getting educated in a situation with ISS kind of would help individuals kind of get clarity on the situation, begin to take and address these kind of systematic barriers, and just put in a plan, as I said, to have enough confidence to take that first step and begin the journey. Now I'm conscious as well, we spoke obviously a lot around decarbonisation, kind of the energy solutions as well, and reducing those emissions. Now, carbon has been a key focus for a lot of organizations also to date, and rightly so. It's a major challenge. It is quite quantifiable to date as well. It's kind of a bit more tangible than some of those other ESG challenges and also metrics to track. And it is, as I mentioned, a kind of global challenge. But I suppose it's important as well for organizations and just taking that first step, but not to get too, solely focused on one tunnel vision. It's a global challenge. There's a complexities, and as a society, it really does require kind of a holistic approach, with decarbonisation obviously being part of that approach. And I think one area that I kind of wanted to dive in, because it is a kind of journey we're on, is kind of around that B Corp certification. And I know you guys are B Corp certified. And I think particularly as a tool to businesses can use to kind of help format and at least plan their journey, it is highly useful. So it'd be great if you could maybe kind of delve into a bit more about that, how you've used it, and kind of what tangible benefits you've seen in that kind of pursuing that certification as well. Would be brilliant.
Sure. So I think if we start above sort of the activities within it, but what it does, it forces a culture, right? So at the end of the day, right, decisions will be made, but if you don't have a framework by which you're putting the governance and the activities and the decision making in front and center, from a sustainability lens, it tends to be forgotten, right? And I just speak out of sort of experience in many other companies where cash will be king, and it is important that companies make money, but cash at the expense of the environment and sustainability cannot be the way that we go forward. So what I'm very proud about is, and we'll talk a little bit more about it in a minute, but it's both us, Verdane, and a number of the companies that we work with have B Corp certification, right? So, it drives the sustainability agenda. It forces us to meet, verified social environmental performance. It requires public transparency and legal accountability. And I think that's fundamentally the difference. To the earlier point, it puts the words into action, and then you have to measure it, right? So I think it'll create a list, and what I find is it creates a list of companies that you're going to work with and those that you will choose to work with. Can you game it? I mean, maybe, but we haven't found any of the companies that we've worked with so far that have, went down this journey and not sort of lived that belief. So for me, it's the demonstration of the culture and the belief of the company that puts it into practice. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think, as you said, it's really that framework, and it's just the initial step to begin that journey. And I think what's really powerful, Justin, as well, speaking for myself, it's high on my agenda, but also from you, it's a piece that you're very proud about having achieved and about what you guys do. And I think that's, I suppose, a particularly important piece around system transformation, but particularly with sustainability action, is that leadership buy-in. and really for change to be driven from the top down and kind of embed throughout the culture. You know, it's important that this piece has the backing of leadership. It can get people educated. You know, they can invest in these solutions and really being a kind of, I suppose, a catalyst for that change. But from your, again, experiences, like, what distinguishes, I suppose, truly effective executive leadership in driving that sustainability agenda? And I think, you know, it would be great for you, because like, this is often a challenge we hear from people, is really trying, particularly if they're leading it within a business and maybe aren't within the leadership team, is, you know, selling that business case of action. You know, it is going to be a cost initially, but really selling that business case. So like, it'd be great if you could share some insights in terms of how leaders can understand and generally champion decarbonisation strategies and provide practical advice to those professionals who are kind of trying to build those compelling business cases for their C-suite or kind of board level to kind of get behind, you know, this action and create this kind of transformation within a business.
Well, I think so. There's a couple of pieces, and it's a great question. So one is, you know, before you go down the road, I mean, I opened with most companies don't have, you know, a sustainability lead or have the budget, so that's a bit of a problem. So what you need to find is really that, you know, informal leader within the organization that cares and is passionate about it, and then find people like you and I, right? So partner with ISS, call UrbanVolt. Like, we're happy to describe what the program could look like. So, because, you know, knowledge is power, and at the end of the day, you need, if you're going to present, right, to the C-suite, you need to make sure that there's some compelling evidence, right, as to what the business case will hold. And what that will typically be is, to my earlier point on, you know, generally, you know, in most public companies or even private companies, I mean, it's quarter by quarter or at least year by year, right? So it's shorter term thinking, where these are longer term investments. So bridging, you know, those two, again, they're not conflicting activities, but bridging that gap to make sure that there's a really compelling business case that walks through the financial summaries, like cost, efficiency, brand, potential, some of the pieces that I talked about earlier, where, you know, our customers are saving money, they're saving the planet, and they're able to use it to market, right, to the companies that are now requiring it on their RFPs. I think, like all things, try to keep it simple, right? Try to make sure that it's just really on task as to, there's a couple of key points and kind of that Trinity discussion that we talked about earlier, like whatever that is for your organization, keep it focused on what's important. Just get a killer team, right? So be it, you know, the individuals in the organization and then the people that you trust. I mean, I've been fortunate where I've had people come and support me in board meetings, and I've been able to support others at exec tables or board reviews. So don't be afraid to ask, right? People like us, like I have nothing but time to try to help people understand. And again, you buy from us, you buy from someone else. I would prefer you bought from me because I think I'm the best. But if you don't, that's okay, right? At the end of the day, I mean, just doing it, to your earlier point, is 9/10, right, of the call to action that we need to do. You know, belief around what you're doing and what you want to do for the company and how you can support. And then just standing out. Like, sustainability can really differentiate your business from others. And I think that unique selling proposition is often forgotten about, and really bringing that to bear is absolutely key.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, just enjoyed a bit more.
Well, I think just probably most of the people on the call, but just understanding, you know, the basic language as well, kind of scope 1, 2, 3 emissions. How does this tie? You know, what do you understand about it? How do you create a link between, again, what the market requires and where you are and how the competitive pressure will change? But that scope emission understanding as to where you sit and what you can contribute and how you can support or hinder the value chain will be the other piece that's really, really critical. Sorry, I cut you off there.
No, exactly. I think that's the biggest piece for me personally anyway, is, you know, that first step is understanding. And I think, you know, you need to have that understanding within the organization, but throughout the organization. And you mentioned there kind of the killer theme and also kind of having dedicated individuals. And for us, particularly when we begin kind of working with a business, it is really kind of about providing that baseline knowledge to everyone, because, you know, it is a system-wide transformation, as I mentioned before. It's going to require a huge lift. So it's going to require the whole organization. And it doesn't matter what role you hold. You might be in procurement, you might be in marketing, you might be in sales. You're going to have the knowledge to really integrate this throughout the business. And I think also for us as well as bringing people on that understanding journey, and you mentioned those passionate people, and I think it's important for businesses sometimes also to identify those passionate people, because you could land this on someone's desk who has no interest, not that they have no interest, but they might have something else. And I think doing a learning journey or beginning this kind of partnering or speaking with an expert, you begin to kind of be able to identify those people who are passionate about this space and who want to kind of drive it within the business. As I mentioned, it's still going to require that system-wide education, but there's going to be certain individuals who want to go to a next level and kind of maybe lead this charge. And it's really, as I said, that needs to come from the top down, but you can find those individuals across different functions that will help kind of drive that change. But that's really, really, really great, Justin. And I think, kind of as I mentioned there, really, as we can both agree, and I think it's kind of the common theme we're kind of speaking about now, is really that initial step, because it is a quite daunting task, particularly for those organizations at that lower level, below the larger MNCs. Resources can be an issue, finance, investment can be an issue, and again, just trying to understand where that first step is in a quite dynamic space. Things are changing, regulations are coming, pressures are coming, even on your tendering, you're getting asked more and more about it. So from your perspective, what are those practical, I suppose, low barrier first steps that you would recommend for business looking to start on this kind of journey? And like, how can companies take kind of meaningful action without getting, paralyzed by the complexity of the challenge? Because that can often be the major barrier to actually begin this journey, to stopping to beginning this journey.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really, really, really good point. I mean, I think through my career, what has always served me well is, understanding kind of who the key partners are that we're going to work with. So, and I don't mean partner necessarily in the formal sense. I mean, who are the people that can, like yourself, right? So who are the learning and educational groups that are really there to help train, build workshops, drive understanding. And a lot of these times, I mean, it's either a nominal fee or it's free, right? So there's a ton of organizations that are out there to really drive performance and understanding of where we are. Call us. So our intent is to remove the financial barriers to do this. So we provide really low cost entry solutions as we go forward. And by the way, I'm not saying just me. Lots of people would love to talk to you. It's picking the partner as you go forward, right? So as you pick a partner, you want to make sure they're going to be there for the long run, right? But making it easier to transact and move into this space is absolutely key. And understanding the market to do that is there. Grants, benefits, tax credits. So from, again, back to that policy component, there's a ton of resources out there that I don't really know if people understand. And again, I think I have a reasonable handle. I think you probably have a pretty good handle of what they are. And if people called us, we'd happily share that with you. And as conversations continue, you learn a little bit more. So it's creating an ecosystem and taking where that 70% threshold where companies don't have someone in the organization and making it, bringing that down or up, right? Where 100% of companies will have at least someone that knows exactly what has to happen. The budget might still be a constraint, but then there's other ways to go about fixing that. And I think just one last point, I think audits and benchmarking are key. Like, where are you currently at, right? So understanding where, from a performance basis, you currently stack up against your competition is either a strength or a weakness. And understanding that will then possibly drive a different behavior. Because if you're doing fairly well today, the impetus to do it will maybe be a little bit less. But I think most companies are lagging behind, right? I mean, we think about in Ireland, I mean, I think it's between sort of 17 and 25% is the probable case where is the gap that we'll miss our 2030 obligations. So this is a pretty serious problem that we have, but there's bite-sized pieces that will get us to a place where, we can just go forward, which I just mentioned a few of.
Yeah, and I think, as you said, it's that those bite-sized pieces just drive further understanding, therefore then drive the next step, and the path gets clearer and clearer. And I think also, as you mentioned, there is supports out there, there is solutions out there, there is partners out there that can really help you with that initial step and the initial understanding. And I think also, just to dive a bit deeper into that benchmarking piece, because I think that's really important, that a lot of kind of still when organizations look at this, they see it in a siloed situation, they see it in their four walls. But I think it's important to also look outwards and kind of see how what others are doing, be it within your sector, be it your competitors, or be it elsewhere, because I think there's a lot to learn also from different sectors, different organizations, how they're approaching it, and kind of fostering that, I suppose, collaborative network as well, because it's important to speak around this. It's a massive challenge. It's not going to be done by one organization. Therefore, it does require that certain level of collaboration, and it really is kind of all about collaboration. But I think having that kind of benchmarking task undertaken gives you that understanding of okay, how are people approaching this? What are some of the goals that are set? How are they tracking it? And what could be achievable for me? Or what maybe is, as you said, those low-hanging fruit that I can take to kind of approach that initial stage. And now before we finish, and again, I know you spoke about this at the start as well, but it would be great to kind of run through it, because I think I just want to pull it back again to those kind of practical examples and practical solutions, and kind of giving people those solutions and case studies that kind of just gives them, I suppose, a bit more motivation and energy around this space. And as I said, it is a massive challenge. There is a lot of barriers, but there's definitely steps you can take to kind of get over that. And I think, that financial piece is always going to be there. And I think it's important for people when they are investing in this, that they can kind of see that ROI area within, let's just take, as you said, your space with the renewable energy and energy efficiency solutions. So could you share some of those examples of the organizations? And again, you don't need to mention these organizations, but maybe just some of the examples around how you you've supported them in successfully navigating this challenge, and kind of giving them that cost benefits they're seeing as a result of this investment.
Yeah, happily. I mean, so I think the solutions that we provide fit in all sizes of companies, right? So they can be very small, where you have kind of kilowatt, like 50, 100 kilowatt systems, which is a fairly small site, to, half a megawatt up to multi-megawatt solutions. And what you see is, reduction of probably a third to a half of power demand, tons, literally tons, like, 50, 100, 500 tons of carbon reduced. 30 to 50% of their cost savings, or their energy, sort of the spend that they have, and their prices are reduced. And overall, their ability to market is so significantly different. And again, it's on, so I guess I'm doing a bad job in describing. It doesn't matter where you are, wherever you sit in the value chain, there's a solution for you. And if you're a small company and don't know where to start, or you're kind of a larger manufacturing group, well established with, 100 million in revenue coming in, it doesn't matter where you fit, because there are solutions out there for every single operator.
Really good. I think, like, to finish on, I suppose, is, that business case here is there.
Yes.
There's no kind of if, buts, and maybes. The business case is there. It's really just a matter of just taking action, and why wait and just take action now, because it's clearly
Correct.
the direction of travel. And I think that's the key piece I think we wanted to kind of bring through here in terms of this conversation as well, is, whether you are a leader, where you are a passionate individual in an organization, it's a matter of kind of gaining that understanding, formulating that business case, because it is there. So I'm just conscious of time, and I'm conscious that, we want to take some questions if they're there. So maybe, Nazia, if there is questions from the audience, we're happy to kind of take some, Justin and I, and again, if not, we can kind of wrap up as well.
Sure. Thanks, Niall. I think there's just this one question that I think is more suited for Justin to answer. It's just around, again, both of you have covered this in some capacity, but if you could just reiterate around what are some of the biggest mistakes that companies tend to make when they're starting their decarbonization journey, and how can they basically avoid them?
Well, hopefully there's a theme where any action is a great action, right? So, I mean, I would encourage anyone that is thinking about this, just start. So, the worst thing that you can do is you don't do anything about it. I think the easiest way to shorten the learning curve, maybe that's the way to answer this, is to pick a partner, right? And, pick someone that knows what they're doing, educate yourself, right, with ISS or other, call someone like ourselves to understand what you want to do. our job is to make it infinitely easier for you to get on this journey, right, at a zero cost investment. I mean, that's the distinction. Again, I'm not the only solution provider out there. There's many, but just call, right? So I think there's no bad decision, right? When you're starting to think about this, I genuinely see only upside, right? Now, shortening the time to decision, right, and picking the right partner, because the flip to this, there's some pretty bad horror stories, or if you don't pick the right partner, things can go bad and it can cost a lot more than you expected. So, selecting and choosing the right people to work with is really, really important. So that due diligence perspective is probably the other side of that coin, where just make sure that, it's a diligent, prudent operator that know what they're doing. If you choose someone like that, then you're in good standing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And just for Niall out there, I see a question coming in around just how sustainability education is evolving to basically address that urgent need of today's businesses to support their decarbonization efforts. Would you like to just cover that?
Yeah, I think like I kind of mentioned it probably briefly earlier on is really, it's about obviously identifying those passionate people and getting them educated, but it is a requirement organization wide. As I mentioned, it is no more just a one person solution or challenge. It's going to require a team and an organizational shift, and people have to get educated and drive that awareness and understanding no matter what role they hold. And ultimately, to create that system change and create that transformation that we require will need an organizational shift. So that's, I suppose, again, it ties in nicely, as Justin mentioned, is really just taking that initial action and beginning, because that just gets you on the journey and gets that kind of, as I mentioned, that journey started. So, yeah.
100%. I think this question is again more directed to you, Justin. It's just around what is UrbanVolt's model, and does that align with carbon markets and credits? And what are your thoughts on these type of mechanisms?
So our model, pretty simple, right? We finance, build, own, operate. So we take the system from initial concept through to construction, through to operation and decommissioning. So we're accountable for the system, and effectively what we're doing is contracting with you for the offtake of the power. We do the sizing, we sort of build it all out. Does it tie in with incentives? It does. As governments change, who knows in the future, but today, they fully do. And as things continue, as policy and regulations continue to evolve, I mean, that's back to my point on, choose a partner that knows what's going on. Like, we're abreast as to the impact, the opportunity, and, where the market's going to be.
Okay. Okay, lots of questions coming in. So there's one just around, what about government incentives in the sustainability field? Were any available to you? That's you, Justin. And would that propel businesses to take on board more sustainability initiatives?
So, I mean, the beauty of where we are, to what we talked about earlier, is it doesn't even matter if there's incentives or not, right? So the tech, as we talked about, stands on its own. So, it makes it a little bit better, but I think the bigger piece is how do you, from a grid and overall system perspective, how do you make sure that, we have connections, that the system will be designed for a future sort of multi-directional kind of localized grid. So I think it would be great if government policy was always sort of consistent and focused and aligned on sort of incenting the build from a sustainability perspective, of which, by the way, it's not bad. And so I'm Canadian, and it's really, really positive, right, in Europe. I mean, the focus that we have and the requirement to move is brilliant. Could it be better? Of course. But is it distracting from the opportunity we have in front of us? It isn't. So, the tech on its own, pretty much in any form that you're talking about, is at parity, and in most cases a lot better than the prices that you pay today. So I think the action is, I wouldn't worry about it. And just to Niall's point, like, let's just pick up and start to move.
Just add to that as well, Nazia, I think speaking in the Ireland UK market, and we know Enterprise Ireland, and we're on the directory there, provide kind of supports and grants around the Green Start program, the green vouchers, with those kind of partnership situations. So you can select either an education provider or a consultant that can support you on this. And then within the UK system, you know, we work a lot of UK councils as well in terms of providing that training side of things. And I'm sure there are similar kind of, and Justin, you might know more, but I'm sure there's similar sort of kind of grant incentives in terms of that as well to support. And I think that's a big piece. They are out there. It's just a matter of kind of identifying them and utilizing them. Like, because I think we mentioned it throughout. You know, it is an important factor of it as well.
100%. I think this question, I leave it to the experts to decide who wants to address it. It's just around COP29 on investments and how developed nations have agreed to allot some of money for poorer nations. And is there a KPI on deliverables and timeline?
No KPI to my knowledge, but I think, yes, exactly. I think there's definitely a fund put in place in terms of developed nations providing to developing, with the obviously premise of that being that, you know, developing nations are the ones that are getting most impacted by climate transformation and climate change and the biodiversity emergency, but are the ones that have least impact or cause in the actual generation or challenge within that. So that's kind of where the output is. Again, we're happy, and I think that's one thing that's probably factored in within our own resources as well as around that COP29. So I think there's more details within that. So we're happy to direct people towards that post this as well.
Brilliant. I think that's all for the questions on LinkedIn. Final thoughts from both of you.
Yeah, well, first of all, just thanks very much, Justin. And yeah, I'll leave it up to Fiona. I think, Fiona, you might have some summary there of initial thoughts, and then we can kind of finalize and conclude for the evening.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Fiona. I'm from UrbanVolt. So I just want to say thank you, first of all, for joining us today, and thank you to our panelists, Niall and Justin, and thank you to Nazia and Shruti for hosting and for answering all my questions. I just want to quickly recap what we've covered today. So I think the main piece to take away is that decarbonisation is not really optional anymore. It's a necessity. So business in Ireland and the UK, I know we're facing challenges and it seems overwhelming and there's quite a lot of noise, but taking action now is the best way to go forward and future-proof your businesses. And I suppose some of the actionable solutions that were mentioned is energy efficient technologies. They're more accessible than ever, and it's also a smart investment for your businesses, no matter the size. Renewable energy adoption, like our as a service model, which eliminates upfront costs and makes basically transitioning into sustainability a lot more easier. And then carbon reporting frameworks like CSRD that's coming down the line, they just ensure compliance and transparency. And if you start now, it will get easier for when it actually comes into play. I also think it's important to note that sustainability isn't just about reducing emissions. It's all about improving your business, your trust with your customers, and then also helps you stand out from the competition as well. And I think it was mentioned a few times, but 70% of businesses don't have a budget for sustainability initiatives, which is quite alarming. But our goal at UrbanVolt is to make sustainability accessible, scalable, and profitable. So we basically help businesses reduce your carbon footprint without the upfront costs. And ourselves and the ISS are here to help you and your business. So our aim is just that you reach out to us, give us a call, pick up the phone, email us, and we can get you started on your journey. So if you want to learn anything else about UrbanVolt, you can visit us at our website at urbanvolt.com or email us at getstarted@urbanvolt.com. And just thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Fiona, for that summary. I think it wrapped up the entire session very well. So thank you so much. And of course, Justin, thank you once again for your insights. Always a delight to speak with you. And Niall, thank you so much for your insights as well. I'm sure everyone on the call has really taken value from today's session. And I would just like to invite everyone to keep a tab on the ISS website for many such events that we'll be doing in the future. So we look forward to welcoming you back for many such intriguing conversations. Keep the sustainability conversation going on, guys, and we'll see you soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.